Okay, so I wanted to take just a minute here at the
Yes.
start of the show to talk about the horrible circumstances at San Bernardino at the regional center there. We have so many friends who work there, so many friends who are treated there.
Absolutely.
It was a very emotional thing for all of us, but it was emotional for the world to see that
Absolutely.
kind of a tragedy. And now at least one of our viewers has written to us and said that they were there, and that they're having some anxiety after
course.
having been there. And we've
Of
had
course.
several families write and say that they've had to have different conversations with their kids as a result of this, and that their kids who weren't there are having anxiety.
Really?
And so I wondered if you could take just a moment. We're going to talk more extensively with Vince Redmond in the next hour about specifics, but you're a licensed psychologist, and
Yes.
I thought it would be really beneficial to have you speak a little bit about when these kinds of tragedies happen.
Of course, of course. It's very traumatic to see something like that, and then even more so to experience something like that. So for those viewers who were actually present, or there's gradients, let's put it that way. So for someone like myself or you, well, I've been to Inland Regional Center a couple of times, but not that often. Someone who works there regularly, let's say, but perhaps wasn't there that day, will experience a little bit more anxiety than I would. Someone who works there and was there but was in a different part of the building will be a higher grade of anxiety, and then someone who was there and was in that part will obviously be higher. So it's kind of like gradients of anxiety, and that's an important thing to notice because the treatment for it also is kind of similar to that.
Okay.
So there's two main things that we generally do. I mean, obviously there's a lot of counseling helps, any kind of talking about what makes you anxious helps. But there are, I suppose, exercises, I guess I would call them, that help people to overcome anxiety when it's of a traumatic nature. So anxiety that's a result of trauma is generally called PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. And it doesn't really have to get to the level of being a disorder. PTSD is classified as a disorder because, remember what I always say about disorders is that they have to be debilitating. They have to prevent you from leading a normal work life or home life. It has to influence one of those two environments, and if it does, then it's considered a disorder. But having said that, people, overcome their stress and handle, let's say they overcompensate for their stress and keep going, but that doesn't mean they're not experiencing anxiety. They could still be experiencing it. So it doesn't have to even be at the level of a disorder for us to talk about it. So we can definitely, if someone is feeling anxious, then you have to kind of identify your own baseline. That means there's two things. So one we'll talk about is tapping. We can talk about that first, and then the other is systematic desensitization, which is more behavioral type of intervention. So tapping is and actually I think EMDR, which is another type of intervention, eye movement desensitization, it has also been found to be quite effective. But the number one treatment for PTSD is actually tapping. It has worked quite a bit with soldiers returning from war and so on. And tapping is not I think you can actually even look it up online now. There are videos, and of course there's a lot of different instructional documents that tell you exactly how to do it. But it is a process that allows you to kind of you relive, you kind of visualize the situation to some extent, and you do various tapping activities, like you literally tap on parts of your body. I think one is here. I don't remember it because I did this training a long, long time ago. Yeah. And it's a series of taps that you do across your body, and you kind of produce that anxiety. You visualize that thing, and then you will continue to do this tapping. And it's almost like it releases the energy of fear, and it releases the energy of anxiety. And if our viewers are interested and write into you, I do have someone that I know who does tapping for his life, and I can ask him to come on the show.
We would love that.
Sure.
We would love that. And I want to say, too, that, it sounds airy-fairy, ridiculous,
yes.
ooh, but there have been segments about this on 60 Minutes and how effective it is at helping, as you said, soldiers who come back from war. It's helped them to be able to move on. This is something that has been proven to be effective.
It's funny, Shannon, because I wouldn't actually talk about it. I wouldn't mention it if it hadn't been scientifically. When I first learned about tapping, and actually I had the same reaction, which tells you how closed-minded I am. The first time when I heard about EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization, which is very similar actually, because you move your eyes back and forth as if in a REM sleep. But so when I first heard about either one of those, I heard through, it was through a continuing education classes that I was taking for my licensure. And I remember thinking, like, is this real? Like, are you kidding me? How does this work? And so on. And it has, like, maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I realized that tapping had become actually the #1 scientifically validated treatment for PTSD, which is kind of interesting. And EMDR is very effective as well for visualization of anxiety-provoking scenes. And they all really, like the tapping and the EMDR, use your body. I think, personally, I think how it works is that it uses your body as a source of perhaps this release of energy, but it's also a very, I guess, grounding exercise that if you really are, terrified of something and you visualize it and you are tapping or you are moving your eyes back, it actually does not only releases certain energy, but it distracts you in a way. I suppose it makes you realize that you're grounded, you're fine, you're here, you're safe, etc. And it dissipates the fear that's associated with that visualization. Now, systematic desensitization, which is the other behavioral process, is very much the same thing. That you list a hierarchy of, like everything else that behaviorists do, we've taken the same concept and kind of made it into like a very kind of objective process. So you list the most fear-evoking to the least fear-evoking. You can do this through 10 steps, 20 steps, 50 steps, whatever works for you. And for instance, the most fear-evoking would be actually probably, for most people, would be actually going back to the scene. So if you were someone who was in the building, you might be experiencing a lot of fear just going back into the building. And the least fear-evoking would perhaps be hearing the word Inland Regional Center or shooting or something like that. And everything in between, a picture of it or a news article or all that sort of stuff, all are different gradients. And you really have to put that list in an order that works for you. And once you have the list, then you start with, the second portion of desensitization is learning some relaxation technique. Now, whether it's something that's like tapping or it's meditation and breathing, when we do it with children, we often do breathing exercises. When it's an adult, we will actually teach them how to meditate and calm their, sort of reduce their blood pressure and reduce their heart rate. But once you have some sort of meditation or relaxing exercise, then all you do is you go through the first phase and you pair it, then you master that and you calm. You're no longer anxious just with the mention of, let's say, shooting. And then you just go up and up gradually over the course of time, and you pair it always with relaxation to the point where you get even the most fear-evoking thing won't produce fear anymore. It's you can be relaxed and even it going back to work or going to that location. Now, there was a lot of miscommunication, I guess, in the media about what, the Inland Regional Center, as far as I know, doesn't have, it's a funding agency. It's an agency that monitors, they may have individuals who are disabled coming and going, but they don't go there habitually. They may be going there for the purposes of getting funding, for the purposes of an evaluation, but it's not like there's a day service program where they go every day. So, I just want any parent perhaps or anyone who's listening to this not to fear the regional center system. Obviously, they had nothing at all to do with this. And in fact, I'm not sure we even know yet really why this occurred. I mean, there's some talk of terrorism, but we don't really know what happened.
Exactly.
But it's a difficult thing. And I think this year has been, and this year and last year, I mean, there have been a ridiculous number of shootings across the U.S., and it's just ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And we're coming up this weekend, we'll mark the third anniversary of the Newtown shooting in Connecticut.
Yep.
And
it's unbelievable that it's already 3 years.
I know. So it and unfortunately, because our kids go to school, even in a special day classroom, it's very likely that there will be some discussion of shootings, and that escalates our kids. I don't know what the answer is about talking about it, not talking about it, but I feel like we don't have a choice, that we must talk about it with our kids because somebody else will.
Well, you know, I think for children, I mean, I remember when I was a child, we would have fire drills. We've had fire drills forever, right?
Yes.
Every school has had a fire drill for God knows how long. And I don't think that it is really no one ever really sat down and explained to us, a fire could come and burn down this building and you could die in it, right? That would be very traumatic for a child, and it is unnecessary.
Right.
Because really, the reason we explain it to the reason we want our children to be informed is just so they do the right thing during emergency procedures. Yes. The same thing for now, living in California, obviously, we have earthquake drills.
Yes.
And we do in school, they have earthquake drills, very common, right?
Yes.
So, and I'm sure in other parts of the country there's tornado drills and whatever else. But it's not like anyone ever really gets to the point of describing the actual event and scaring the kids. It's just practice of the procedures. So I think, in my mind, what would be appropriate for schools and children right now is to simply review emergency procedures in case of something dangerous, such as a shooting. So I would call it perhaps a shooting or an intruder type of emergency, and then practice places where the children can go and hide and being quiet and so on and so forth. And I think that is sufficient, and it's not necessary to traumatize kids, because it really is beyond. Not only is it beyond their understanding, it's almost as if we're entering their world and shattering it for no reason. Yes. Children are not able to yet understand that there is evil. And, you know, the longer they can avoid believing in that, the better.
Yeah, that's called childhood and
innocence,
and we don't want to destroy that.
Exactly.
But you know what they call, I don't know if they call it this way all over the country, but they call it in California a lockdown.
Lockdown,
That's what they call it.
And of course, there's a lot of lockdown drills going on now. I know my kids' schools have lockdown occasionally here and there, and it's, you know, it's something you have to do.
We have a wonderful viewer that we so enjoy. He's been on the show before. DJ has written in and said that it was appropriate for us to say his name. He said, I previously asked for some help for a 24-year-old blind male with cerebral palsy and autistic tendencies. He is now having major sleep issues. At times he's awake for 2 to 3 days and on occasion longer. He has a BCBA. The BCA used to visit once a week, but now comes once a month because the BCBA was not very helpful. This is in DJ's opinion. I'm sure that they would say something differently, but
I think, I mean, he might be actually right on the individual and the family might agree, because sleep is not something that a BCBA can. This type of problem with sleep, I mean, this is not the normal type of thing with children who wake up in the middle of the night and then we behaviorally train it.
Right.
This is quite different. Yes.
So he says, I have another very important question for you. My question is, what can be done to help him sleep properly?
Yes.
I suggested tranquil sleep, and he is on melatonin, but really need your expert opinion and suggestions. He is 110 pounds and takes 3 teaspoons of melatonin a night.
So, DJ, the tranquil sleep is different from melatonin, and it's funny because melatonin does absolutely nothing for me, and tranquil sleep is amazing. So and I don't want to be giving medical advice, but this is what I do, and tranquil sleep is a combination of melatonin and tryptophan and theanine, and those 3 things together seem to have a much longer, better effect. Here's what melatonin does to me. It puts me to sleep and wakes me up in about 4 to 6 hours. And then I'm wired. And so I think that it has that effect on a lot of people. In fact, I'm not sure melatonin is helping this individual. It could be harming them. Right. So Other relatively benign things that can help with sleep are things like antihistamines, like diphenhydramine, which is Benadryl. Benadryl is relatively harmless at low doses, but it does make you very sleepy, and it keeps you kind of lethargic for a while. And then the combination, obviously, of, let's say, Benadryl generally comes across the counter as 25 milligrams. And I personally, and I'm just saying what I personally do, is sometimes when I'm really jet lagged and can't sleep at all, I'll take 2 Benadryl, which is 50 milligrams of diphenhydramine, and then 6 milligrams of melatonin, which is great. Not melatonin, tranquil sleep.
Tranquil sleep. Which, by the way, is an over-the-counter.
It absolutely is. You can buy it everywhere. It's a health. I mean, you can buy it at health food stores because really, it's nothing harmful. It's in fact good for you to have. Adults should have 6 milligrams daily. So both of those together will pretty much get me through any kind of situation. And I travel a lot. And my brain is tired mostly, and it really does help. In fact, it really helps my functioning. It's funny because I was just traveling last week and I came back and I don't have any tranquil sleep. I'm out right now. And it's like, it is a huge difference for me. So that's what I would do. Now, I think with someone who is having this level of difficulty, I mean, not sleeping for 2 to 3 days is crazy. Like, that is just horrendous for you. And I really think that this is not something that a behaviorist can help you. They need to see a physician, and a physician will take this very, very seriously, and they will probably do sleep studies, like an overnight sleep review with EEG, electroencephalogram, so they can see what's going on in the brain. 2 to 3 days of not sleeping is one of the most harmful things we could ever do to ourselves. So this is something very serious, and I think that, obviously there's a reason that they haven't seen a physician yet. And if they can't see a physician, certainly trying various over-the-counter medications or supplements are fine. But I really do recommend that this person try to get help from a doctor, because this is a pretty significant issue.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And his next question, he says, Dr. Tony Atwood now considers the former Asperger syndrome to be level 1 based on levels of severity in the new DSM. Do you agree, with that? And if so, do you consider pervasive development disorder not otherwise specified as level 2 and autism level 3 based on the new DSM-5 criteria for autism spectrum disorder?
So, DJ, you're so smart. I have to give a little bit of introduction to our viewers before I can answer your questions so they can catch up with you. So on the DSM-5, there's actually two areas, not one area, but 2 areas of, deficit or difference, like symptomology. And one area is the social emotional area of skill, and the other area is repetitive behaviors, what we call repetitive behaviors. And in order to receive a diagnosis of autism, you have to have a certain number of subsymptoms within the first area and the second area. And if you have the correct combination, then you would get a diagnosis of ASD. And to answer your question, first of all, I consider Tony Atwood to be much more of an expert in Asperger's than myself. Tony has pretty much dedicated his life to dealing with Asperger's alone, and he has some amazing treatment protocols and modalities. So I respect his opinion very, very much. In fact, I've learned from him, and I love his material, and he's one of my ASD heroes. So having said that, you have to realize that there's those 2 areas. Now, I assume Tony Atwood is referring to a level 1. Okay, so again, for the audience, there's levels of severity, and the levels of severity have to do with the amount of support needed. So a level 1 would require less support than a level 3. Obviously, the level 3 person is someone who would need a lot of support. But the levels are actually given, diagnostically, they're given to each area of deficit. So you never say that someone has ASD level 1. You say they have ASD with level 1 in social emotional, maybe level 2 in repetitive behaviors. So there's always two grades of the level system. So you're grading the social emotional and you're grading the repetitive behavior. Those two areas are both graded that way. So it's actually the way you diagnose the verbiage is completely different. You don't even mention the levels. You say needing support, significant support, or so on. But anyway, to answer your question, I think most individuals who would have been diagnosed with Asperger's in the past will most likely have a fit level 1 in the social emotional. Where they fit in level 2 in the repetitive behaviors, I don't know. I think it varies. One of the repetitive behavior areas, there's 4 listed under there, and one of them is things that resemble anxiety, things that resemble obsessive compulsive behavior, right? Repetitive behaviors are generally, some of them are very similar to obsessive compulsive behavior. So when you have those things, and individuals with Asperger's often have those things. They often experience anxiety and they often have repetitive behaviors to try and calm the anxiety. So you could potentially have Asperger's and get a level 2 on the repetitive behavior section. But Tony's right in that in the social emotional section, you most likely have a level 1 support system, because most individuals with Asperger's are actually very good at speaking and are less delayed in the social emotional area.
Okay,
Hope
great
that
question,
answers.
DJ. Wonderful question. We're going to take a break and then we're going to come back with...
I didn't answer his last section.
the
Sorry, I'll be very quick. Again, the same thing with the PDD. The pervasive developmental disorder is variable. You could be a level 3 and 1, 2, or 1, whatever it matters. It kind of makes things a little bit more complicated because there really are 2 areas. And, I never like to, I think all individuals are quite different.
Yeah.
So PDD people who would have had a PDD diagnosis may, to this day, have a level 1 on both domains, a level 2 on both domains, or any other combination.
Okay. I love this question, though. It's very interesting. My child was a card client, and he recovered 2 years ago. And we've been very happy about it.
That's wonderful.
And they said, thanks, card. I'm wondering, though, if there is any way I can purge his diagnosis permanently from his medical record so that it doesn't follow him through his life. Our family is very happy with the things are now, but we do not want his medical history to hold him back in any way in the future. Is it possible to remove a medical record? If so, how do I go about it? Is there anyone I can consult to get me through this process?
I don't think there's any way to remove a medical record, but there are 2 things you can do. One is you can specifically send a letter to all of his medical providers, his previous medical and behavioral healthcare providers, and specifically say that this is a letter, and this is important to do, this is a letter that rescinds any prior release that we would have given you for sharing information. So, you are very protected when it comes to medical information as long as you have not released it. And we tend to not realize how often we release our medical information. In fact, when you sign something with a health insurance company, you pretty much are releasing your medical information to them. And you have to fill out a form that attests to the truth about the medical condition. So if I were you, I would first of all make sure that I historically tell every doctor or service provider in the past that they no longer have permission to, that I am not giving a release. I am ending, because sometimes when we sign releases, there's no end date on the release, and that's very important. That I am ending any release that I would have given to them to share my information with anyone, and that's important. Second thing is, obviously the cleanest way to do this is to have new insurance, in which case you're filling out new forms because he no longer has a diagnosis. You would not put any diagnosis down, and you're not lying about that. That's the truth. So that's that. The last thing you can do is you can have his records sealed. Now, keep in mind, you have a decent amount of control over his medical records, but I'm not sure how much control you have over his educational records, because educational records track you as well, follow you as well. And getting records sealed, whether they're educational or medical, is a process. You need an attorney to do this, and you need to find an attorney that specializes in special education, and they can help you. And it is a filing. It's an actual legal filing that seals all records. And depending on where you are, we can certainly try to help you with the right attorney.
Yes, we know some very good ones, in fact, who might know a great deal about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
In any case, moving on to this next question. They've been waiting patiently to talk with you about this. My question is for you and also to Dr. Granpeesheh. We are in New Jersey. Our son, who is severely affected with autism, he will be 3 years old in the spring. Been up and down the state of New Jersey, literally left our home, moved twice for services. It's not that we don't think there are good services here. It's just that we don't see anyone that focuses on early intensive behavioral intervention to pursue recovery. There are some agencies that service this niche, but most seem like glorified staffing agencies. There is the top ABA schools that claim to follow the 47% methods, but do not achieve those results. In fact, the handful of transition students from the top schools we saw had visible issues. An inside message was that parents did not fundraise and lost the spot. We are now getting services at home from a reputable provider. We have a very professional team who are kind and attentive, but it feels like we're running an ABA homeschool. But we want to shoot for recovery, and this is not going to cut it. My wife wants to continue as our son's full-time therapist and hire an amazing BCBA. She's a stay-at-home certified teacher and parent-trained, and criticizes our good current therapists, knowing that she can do better and work harder. To me, being responsible suggests that this is kind of crazy, but we've tried the top schools and a reputable home service provider. My son made the most progress with my wife. We are interested in your thoughts on a remote or other BCBA who are experts on EABI, early intensive behavioral intervention, in the country. Does remotely really work? We are interested in CARD, but it seems new to New Jersey, and we prefer home services. Could you really do better? Your advice is appreciated greatly, and thank you very much. And they gave their email.
Sure, I'm happy to answer this question.
Now, I will
There's a lot of really good stuff in here.
Yes, I will just tell you that because this came in 2 weeks ago, what I said was call the 800 number and get started with CARD, so that by the time we talk to Dr. Granpeesheh, you're already moving in that direction. So
sure,
I did ask them to do that.
And that's great. But I'm not, and we can help you certainly, but I'm not sure you need us. So let's talk about that.
Okay.
So you are, first of all, your child is very young, because your child is going to be 3 in the spring.
Yep.
So that means right now they're like 2 years, 8 months, 9 months, something like that, and that's fabulous.
Yes.
So you are in your window, and great. So don't worry, don't panic. You've done a lot of research, and you seem to know a lot already for how old your child is. It's disgusting to me to hear that most of the people on the East Coast or in New Jersey don't do EIBI and they don't focus on recovery. It's just, I'll try not to comment on it because it'll produce profanity. It upsets me. Because most of them do claim to do the original low-loss method, which is the 47% that you refer to,
right.
And most of them don't. In fact, I know this as a fact because I get into trouble all the time with ABA boards because I do that method, and
right.
I'm very insistent on recovery, and it's a hilarious thing that our own boards have in the past given me a hard time about saying, yes, you can actually recover kids.
Yes.
That happens all the time, and yet it's still a joke to some people. I don't know. But having said that, you have several really good things on your side. One is that, and forget about those top schools. Don't even worry about it. You're past that. You have a better situation going. You have a wife who is credentialed, she's a certified teacher, and she's trained, and she's heavily involved. So that is your winning card. Your wife is the reason your kid is going to have the very best chance. And these are the things I would suggest that you do right now. So the first thing is, I would suggest that your wife gets on the following websites. So first you get on the skills website, which is skillsforautism.com, and you become a member. I think it's something like $70 a month or something, and there might be some sort of promotion going on now too, I don't know. But you go on and you become a monthly licensee of skills, and you and your wife answer all the questions. It won't take very long because your child's very young. It'll take several hours though. And you answer all the questions about your child. That will give you a profile of what your child's needs are and where his actual weaknesses and areas of deficit are. So as you're doing that, your wife needs to get on the IBT website, which is Institute for Behavioral Training, and that is ibehavioraltraining.com. And there, I would suggest she doesn't go through just the parent training. I would suggest she goes through as many modules as she possibly can on the paraprofessional and then the professional modules. So that's a lot. That's not something she can do in a month or two. If she did it back to back solid, it would probably take her half a year or maybe more. So I would say she looks at them, she does a sort of set up a curriculum for herself, and she starts going. The basic package is important to get through immediately. The basic package is something around 40 somewhat hours. And so that's the first thing I would suggest she does. And then I think that you have a choice. So what you have now is you have IBT modules teach you how to follow that Lovaas technique and how to teach using ABA and how to correct behavior and so on. And your child probably doesn't have a lot of behaviors. Our kids tend to develop behaviors a little bit later than 2 because they're not frustrated yet.
Right.
Once they get frustrated, they start to develop behaviors, challenging behaviors. So, but it'll teach you all of it. It'll teach you the techniques you need, everything. Your wife will learn all of that stuff and she'll become quite knowledgeable. I also think it would be a good kind of use of our book. She should purchase our book, which I never remember the name of. It's effective. I think it's effective intervention. What is it called?
I think it's effective treatments.
Treatments for autism.
The CARD method.
Card method. And
yes.
I think you just look up the CARD method and the book will pop up, and that will describe our technique. And our technique is based on the Lovaas technique because I studied with Lovaas. So everything we do is very much EIBI. EIBI, in fact, is a term that developed way after we started doing this, but it only means early intensive, which I hope you're doing intensive, by the way, which means that your child should be receiving around 40 hours of therapy per week. Now, this I'm saying very slow and carefully and loudly, 40 hours of therapy a week. So that over the course of 7 days, we're talking about 5 to 6 hours of therapy per day. When your child is this young, you'll need to break that up. So most children of this age really can't do much past the first hour and a half. They can do probably 2 hours as long as you really make it fun.
Yeah.
And what it is at this age is a lot of, it's really just teaching. And skills will tell you, that's what I was trying to say. IBT teaches you the methods. Skills, where you've assessed your child, will tell you the content and how to teach each thing, but also in which order. What's level 1, what's level 2, and so on. And that's what's the most important thing. The techniques, which most BCBAs know, are not as important as the order and content that you teach. So knowing what your child's deficits are and then teaching the right things in the right order using ABA is what leads to success. That was a really good statement. I should repeat that statement. That's the whole thing. So now you will have that. You have skills and you have this. What you need is a team, because your wife, there's no way any single human being could teach that many hours. So you'll need a team of, I would say, probably about 5 people, and your wife will oversee the thing. And if you can get a good BCBA to come on board and follow the skills program, great. If not, you don't need it. You just need those people to actually go through the training as well. Now, having a local provider obviously gives you, or us, anyone, a provider, gives you the ability to get insurance funding. Yeah. Now, we have families, New Jersey right now is being helped through one of our New York sites, I think, and in fact the regional manager is here right now.
Yes.
It's either Manhattan or Larchmont, I don't know. I think both might be providing services to New Jersey, but we are opening in New Jersey. We're hoping to open in 2016.
Okay.
So we will have some local presence in New Jersey. The fact that we're not there for a long time doesn't matter. All of my sites follow exactly what we do, and we're doing this for 35 years. I've been doing this for over 35 years. So CARD's pretty old and pretty experienced. This is an easy population for us, the younger kids, because we've been doing it for ages. We know what we're doing. So I think the key to this whole thing is you do as much therapy as you can, high quality techniques, and a lot of good content. And I've given you resources that'll provide all that. Finding the therapist really has to do with whether, if you go with an agency, the agency will help find the therapist. There's tons of turnover in the therapist world. There's nothing you can do about that. But you don't need to. You could also hire those therapists unless you have insurance funding, in which case you want to access that through a provider. But otherwise, you can hire good people and put them through the IBT training as well. Once you've bought a module, you can use that module for 10 people. It doesn't really matter. And that's it. You have your team, you have your program, you know the techniques, and you just do intensive therapy. The overall game plan for your child is that you do massive amounts of therapy to get the child to a point where he can have some basic speech and language, not advanced language, but some basic language, because once he enters the world of other children, which you don't necessarily need to worry about just yet, but once your child enters the world of other children, they need to be functional to the point where they can communicate, understand a little bit, follow, lead, interact, take turns, all of that sort of stuff, which is what we do in our first year of intervention. Now, Skills, the program that I was saying, also has the ability for you to connect with a supervisor who guides you. So you could, for instance, just go with supervision with CARD, and CARD will then guide you. The supervisor will guide you through the steps of using Skills. But I mean, yes, remote is possible. Are you kidding? One of my kids is recovering right now in South Africa. I see them on Skype or, on Facebook, and it's perfect. I can see exactly what he's doing, and I can tell them what to do, and he's doing great. And I've had children recover through our remote services as well. So yes, you could do all of that.
There you go.
Just want to make sure you feel empowered.
That's it.